Number one is we have to come to terms with the fact that love bombing is also love bonding. Now, we're going to tie all these things together here in just a moment, but what we're talking about is that time when you are pushed to the limit. Maybe you have been pushed to the limit in the past, and I'm sure you have by narcissists. Now, I want to just throw this in parenthetically. You got to keep in mind that just as we typically focus on individual narcissists, there is such a thing as group narcissism. And you will find this just about anywhere people congregate. Now, we're talking about the place where you work. There could be this thing where a group of people form, well, they call them cliques. And it's kind of like there's an attitude, or maybe a spirit, if you want to use a spiritual term, of narcissism. They're just better than everyone else, and you are excluded. Well, have you ever just, with that group, or maybe it's an individual, but have you ever come to a point in time, okay, I'm going to stop and think here for a second. I need to do a video on group narcissism. Okay, back to the topic. But what happens when you come to the end of your rope, so to speak, and they've pushed you to the limit? Well, let's talk about that for a second. And the first thing we need to understand is how we got in this situation in the first place. And the first place is we were love bombed. You already know that. But we also need to focus, as I mentioned a moment ago, that when we are being love bombed, there's also a bond being tied. That is why the person or the group love bombs us. So maybe you've been involved, maybe not in the workplace, maybe in a church. I've had churches I've gone to, and they were basically more cliques than churches, and I just, I'm not going to put up with this, and walked out the door, didn't come back. You know, no remorse whatsoever. I had to get out of that environment. There was nothing spiritual about it. It was just a put on, just a show. I've seen that a lot in schools. Now, the high school that I went to, we really didn't have cliques like most high schools have, because I think it's because the school was very large. We had like 5,000 students. It was literally the largest school in the state at that time. And it was just too big to have all those little cliques. I mean, if they were there, and they probably were, nobody seemed to notice. It wasn't like the cool kids versus the other group of kids. There were just too many of them to form those kinds of dominant groups. It just didn't happen. But the reason I say that is because most people, when they think back at their high school experience, or even their middle school experience, they remember those cliques, those narcissistic groups. And they understand that, you know, there were some occasions, maybe not in your life, but there have been some occasions with some people where they just had it with them. And they were pushed rather to the limit if they were being, I don't know, harassed or bullied or otherwise abused by this clique. Okay, let's go back and focus on individuals, because that's where most of us are right now. Okay, so you've been love bombed, number one, and you've been love bonded. So somebody love bombs you so they can use that love as a rope. Kind of a silk rope, you know, it feels good. We like being bonded to this person because they're charismatic or they're friendly. They make us feel warm and fuzzy inside. That's by design. I mean, they are intentionally, willfully, if it's a narcissist, intentionally, willfully causing us to be bonded to them so they can later manipulate us. So the next thing they do, number two, is they devalue us. So first of all, they loved us, or they presented to be loving. They weren't really, it was fake, but now the real person comes through. They begin to devalue us because that gives them a sense of superiority. And that feeds their ego, and there's a word people use for that. It's called supply. So what is a supply? Well, you know, I went to the grocery Sunday morning. I typically go like 6 o'clock in the morning when no one's there. So I don't have to deal with people, you know. So I go to the grocery store on Sunday morning, get up early, and get my supplies. Get my supplies of food, get my supplies of Diet Pepsi. I get my supplies, things I need for the week. Well, the narcissist needs to feed his ego. Look, we need to feed our bellies, feed our bodies. The narcissist needs to feed his ego. And I guess all of us do to some point, but the narcissist just way over the top. It's like he or she can't survive unless he or she has their ego being fed. Where do they get that supply? They get it from you. They do it by devaluing you, by putting you down, by hurting you, by making you look bad or making you feel bad. You know what I'm talking about? Chances are, right this very moment, you can think of a person, you got a person in your mind, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That individual devalued you so that they could have this false sense of value increase their own value. I don't know what the antonym of devalue is, but they will take worth from you and they will add that worth to themselves. They will take value from you and they will add that value to themselves in their mind and sometimes in the minds of others as others watch this unfold. Third thing we need to keep in mind is we have to deal with narcissists who inevitably, and I do mean inevitably, because they're narcissists, become overconfident. Narcissists think they can do no wrong. They don't think they can make mistakes. They become extremely confident in the fact that they sucked you in and now they are devaluing you. You are unwittingly enabling the narcissist. I say you are, probably past tense could also apply you were, and maybe we can make it in the future. You will again in the future, hopefully not. But I've gone through this more times than I care to remember. Man, I'm in my 70s. I've seen a thing or two. I'm kind of sharing with you my experiences from the past. But my experience has been that narcissists, by their very nature, are overconfident. They don't think they can fail. And because you fell for their love bombing and love bonding, and because you allowed them to devalue you for a period of time, that gives them immense confidence that they're just all that. I mean, they can pull it off and they get away with it. But they're wrong. Their overconfidence is the crack in their vessel, so to speak, that imminently is going to cause them to fall apart. Ever had a little tiny crack in the windshield of your car, and in time it grows and grows, and finally you got to replace your windshield? As you travel, and every little bump, no matter how tiny it is, has pressure on that crack, makes it grow. Well, narcissists are cracked windshields, and it may not show at first, maybe a tiny little thing, but when they start getting overconfident in their relationship with you, which is at the very beginning, and it just kind of grows, but you don't see it, eventually that's going to be their downfall. So you are now seeing these cracks in the vessel or the windshield of the narcissist. And he or she is so arrogant, so blinded by their own conceit that they can't see that you see. That's how they just keep going on, but you're catching on to them. And so eventually, you have this, what I call the wait a minute, wake up moment. You say, wait a minute. There was this love bombing, and now there's this devaluation. These are not the same things. It's coming out of the same person, but this is not the person I thought they were. You've had that experience, right? So that is what I call the wake up moment. That is where we go from darkness to light, which is really a gray area. We talk sometimes about luminance and how things become illuminated. Like, the crack of dawn. I mean, when is it daytime? Well, we talk about subliminal, and then we talk about liminal. Subliminal is when it's dark. Everything is there, you just can't see it. But when the sun begins to rise, it starts to become liminal. No longer subliminal, now it becomes, I would call it epiliminal. I just made up that term, maybe it's a real term, I don't know. But it's very clear. Well, when does that happen? Well, I don't know that there's an exact time You know, like, what time is it now? It's 7:10 in the morning where I am. And if I look out the window, I see basically nothing. But yeah, the sun's starting to come up a little bit. I can see things kind of shadowy, kind of gray area. And that's what it's like when you start catching on to a narcissist. You know, it's not really clear, but it's clear enough. You can see, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. So you have this dissonance in your mind, this conflict. The way things you thought were and the way you see them now because, well, the sun's starting to come up in your brain. Figuratively speaking. All right, so now you have this wake-up moment because the overconfident narcissist has, he just overplayed his hand or her hand. And a lot of times they don't care. They don't care if you find him out. In fact, they're kind of glad you did. Because then they feed their supply by the term for this is number 5, by the way, is duper's delight. They duped you, and now you found out about it, and they're kind of giddy. See, I got you. I won. It's kind of like a celebration at the end of a ball game. We outplayed you. The problem is you didn't know there was a game. The narcissist did. It was a game from the very beginning, and that's part of his game. Is playing the game without you knowing it, playing her game without you knowing there's a game going on. And they call that, again, duper's delight. Now, let's tie these things together. Love bombing, which is love bonding, the fact that they move on to devalue you and you begin to see it. They become overconfident, and then you have that wake-up moment because they are pushing a little bit too hard, then a lot too hard, and then once they're found out, you caught on to them, duper's delight kicks in. They're so delighted, so giddy that they pulled it off on you, and they're kind of glad that you know because that makes them feel smart in a weird kind of way. Well, the way we tie all this together is we understand that as victims of narcissistic abuse, all of us have limits, or we should. You may get into a trauma bonding situation, which that seems to be cyclical. You almost have to jump off the Ferris wheel, so to speak. Now, let's don't call it a Ferris wheel, let's call it a merry-go-round. That way, you don't get killed, you just break a leg. So you jump off the cycle. If you're in a trauma bond, not an easy thing to do. Typically, you need help to get that done from a therapist. But nonetheless, you have limits. But here's the thing that really ties this together. In addition to the fact that victims of narcissistic abuse have limits, narcissists have no limits. They don't have boundaries in that sense. I mean, they just don't stop. They're done with you. They discard you. They go on to someone else. There's no conscience there. There's no empathy. They just flat out don't care. If you got something out of this video, join our YouTube family by subscribing. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And if you would leave a comment, let us know if you can associate or affiliate or identify. That's the word I was looking for. If you can identify with any of these things we're talking about, let us know in the comment section. And we'll see you all next time.